Hi and welcome to this webinar presented by BOC. I'm Natasha Warren, Marketing Campaign Specialist here at BOC. Today's discussion will be centred on the growing need for urgency to act on industrial decarbonisation and explain why BOC believe it is necessary to act now in order to avoid being exposed to higher costs in the future. Before we start, I have a couple of housekeeping points to go over. If you have any questions for us, please do type them in the Q&A box on the webinar screen and hit submit. We'll pick up as many as we can by the end of the webinar. Finally, if you do experience any technical issues, generally refreshing your browser, this will clear up any problems. Today's session will be led by BOC's Wayne Bridger and Cedric Hansen.
Hello and welcome to the webinar. My name is Wayne Bridger and I'm currently the Head of Applications and Decarbonisation for BOC in the UK. By relevant experience, I've worked in gases and gases technology for almost 30 years. And in the past 3 years or so, I've led the efforts of BOC, particularly leading large-scale industrial decarbonisation and industrial fuel switching trials, and developing the feasibility for hydrogen fuel switching across industries such as cement, lime, glass production, and perhaps most relevantly to today's webinar, large-scale industrial steam boilers at a large blue-chip consumer goods manufacturer.
Hello, I'm Cedric Hansen. I'm a chemical engineer and have 35 years experience with BOC and Linde Group. My current role is in business development for new applications. I've done that for the last 14 years, looking at a range of sectors in food and beverage, chemicals, water and environment. And in that time, I've had the pleasure of working extensively with government, industry and academia to bring new processes and applications through. So the backdrop to today's webinar is the increasing focus on climate change and the climate change crisis that we're facing. The reason for that is that the CO2 levels today are 50% higher than they were before the Industrial Revolution. So today they're approaching 420 parts per million, and a couple of hundred years ago it's 280 parts per million. So the main issue here is that due to CO2 levels in the atmosphere, the global temperature is increasing and has been increasing steadily for the past 50 years. The reason for that is that CO2 as a substance and as a gas re-radiates heat into the atmosphere, and once it's there it's very difficult to remove. At the moment globally 40 billion tons of CO2 is released annually, and at the current rates we only have about 10 years to limit the temperature rise to within 1.5 degrees C, or about 400 billion tons of CO2 that we're going to release. And we only have 17 years to limit the rise to 2 degrees C. So you can see the issue is very urgent. And once in the atmosphere, CO2 lingers. After 100 years, there's a third of it still present. After 1,000 years, still 20% still remains in the atmosphere.
Okay, so we've heard about CO2 and the need for industrial decarbonisation. So I want to think about the way that the UK government has set out its plans for industrial decarbonisation and the strategy surrounding that. That basically consists of three approaches: industrial fuel switching, electrification, and carbon capture, utilisation and storage. And BOC and Linde, our parent company, believe that we have really strong capabilities in at least two of these three areas. So our reputation and our capability around industrial fuel switching and hydrogen, and carbon capture and storage plant. So just before we move on, I wanted just to step back briefly to provide you with just some background to BOC as an industrial organisation. We are the largest provider and manufacturer of industrial gases in the UK and Ireland. And we've been manufacturing, transporting, storing and engineering hydrogen systems for many decades. So whilst hydrogen is new to many people at this time, it's definitely not new to BOC, and we have considerable expertise in the field of hydrogen. And to that end, we were the trusted partner with BEIS with the recent round of industrial fuel switching trials, the phase 1 trials, which were carried out during 2020 and 2021. And BOC had a very significant role there, and we mobilised over 100 hydrogen trailer deliveries to support trials across 4 different sites in the northwest of England. Beyond that, in the mobility sector, BOC owns and operates the Kitty Brewster hydrogen refuelling station, which is one of Europe's largest hydrogen refuelling stations, and that's being used to decarbonise the bus service in that part of the world. So, if we move on to consider what are the drivers for change here, and importantly, what are the advantages of acting now and the potential implications for delaying when it comes to our thoughts about industrial decarbonisation. So firstly, we know that the government has set a net zero target for 2050, but we don't have all of the answers as to how to get there. So the government are investing heavily in innovation and in technology. For example, BEIS is funding industrial fuel switching trials, is funding energy transformation, red diesel replacement, and a wide range of other initiatives aimed at demonstrating the technical feasibility of this transition to low carbon manufacturing. And in doing so, it's offering very generous and large scale funding for manufacturers to run projects and to demonstrate feasibility in their own setting. And at the last count, there was something around £1.5 billion of government money announced and allocated to support these projects across various sectors. And that really is there to promote the acceleration of decarbonisation. So the carrot for and the incentive for change exists to try to attract participants to this process of decarbonisation and to encourage the early adoption of low carbon technologies. But along with the carrot, there is often a stick. And in this scenario, the stick that's being used by the UK government to encourage this transformation will be carbon taxation. And that's in the form of the UK ETS, the Emissions Trading Scheme. This was initially conceived as a European emissions trading scheme, as many of you will know. And post-Brexit, it's now a UK-controlled scheme and currently provides free carbon allowances to the largest CO2 emitters. But be clear, this scheme will be used to draw in an increasing number of participants and CO2 emitters. And the rapid reduction in free allowances will expose organisations not currently in the scheme into the scheme if they've failed to abate or reduce their energy use and their CO2 emission. And that can be achieved through energy reduction, through fuel switching, and other abatement steps that that will expose the cost of carbon credits that are traded through that scheme. And if you followed the UK carbon price over recent months, you'll see that the trend in that scheme is that there's been an inexorable rise in the cost of carbon, the yearly high being around £97 per tonne, and forecasters are suggesting that would rise, over and into £100 a tonne during 2023. So the consequence of that is that the cost of carbon is inevitably going to rise for those that don't reduce and act now to reduce their carbon emissions. So there's a looming threat, and BOC think it's time to act to try to reduce your carbon emissions, but also reduce the risk of higher costs as a consequence of your carbon emissions at some point in the near future. To illustrate this, those familiar with the emissions trading scheme will know that there was a fairly gentle regression of free allowances, which was proposed to reduce over a long period through to early 2030. But the UK government have been consulting on this in recent months, and the change in policy, which is anticipated here, is a rapid acceleration in the reduction of free allowances. So you'll see from the solid line that's highlighted on the slide, there is this cliff edge, which is likely to occur sometime in the next year or two, where those free allowances will be rapidly reduced. And we think that exposes customers to a significant change in cost if they are an existing participant in the ETS scheme. Secondly, we believe the threshold at which people will be drawn into the trading scheme will be reduced, and therefore those that aren't currently in the scheme may well find themselves with a cost of carbon. And I just wanted to give you an example, and this comes from a real life example. It's been anonymized for obvious reasons, but this is the trend line for a BOC supplied customer. They have exceeded their free allowances. This sharp upturn in their real costs is a consequence of their additional cost of carbon. So we are really warning that in the very near future, whilst it hasn't been an issue to this point, the cost of carbon is likely to escalate very significantly and to impact on a wider group of customers than it has historically. So our message about acting now to avoid costs in future is very much geared around this understanding that there will be a step change in the cost of carbon for carbon emitters in the UK.
So net zero by 2050 is a legally binding target, and so are the carbon budgets that the UK government has signed up to between now and 2037. This graphic shows you where we've got to. So in the first period, 2008 to 12, we met the target, and the same second up to 2017. The next budget takes up to 2022, and you can see that we're on track to do that. So we're doing pretty well so far. The issue, though, is that the carbon budgets get harder to meet. And we're off track for the next 5-year period to 27, and definitely off track up to 2037. So what we can reasonably expect is that tougher measures to come in from government to try and meet these legally binding targets. And of course, by 2050, we need at least 100% reduction. So we've got a ways to go yet. Hence, there's an urgency to act now, and to waiting is not a good option, because these will come to face us in the imminent near future. So moving on to the next slide. So what we're saying really is to act now and think about it now. Otherwise, potentially you'll be paying later in some way. So we recognise that there are many challenges at the moment within the economy, and not least for food and drink manufacturers. We've got the issue of current energy prices. We've got inflation well above 10%, and in some sectors of food and drink up to 20, 30, 40% in certain products. But there is a price to inaction on net zero, as we're just trying to explain, and not least in preparedness of yourselves to that change that's going to come. So our recommendation is to take practical action to start now, and to make that journey step by step in terms of understanding what your carbon footprint is and where you want to make those changes, and potentially look at fuel switching as part of that armoury to reduce your carbon footprint. So back in earlier in 2022, we did a survey with the British Frozen Food Federation to try and understand what companies were experiencing at that time. 2/3 expected decarbonisation to be somewhat or highly challenging to their business. That's not really a surprise to us. We're the same, and we expect those learnings to be challenging, but we also recognise that there's things that can be done. Nearly half, which is a little bit more worrying, had no plans so far in terms of the journey towards net zero. As we've said, the clock is ticking, and your customers will expect you to do something in this area. And then finally, 6 in 10 anticipated an increase in production costs in order to hit the net zero targets. So some of that may be the case, some of it may not be. If it's done well and in a timely manner, we can become more efficient and productive, and that will help offset some of those costs. And if we do things at scale, some of those early costs will come down, and the government fully expects to have to support the industry to make those industry changes, and are running competitions right now in order to make that happen.
We would now like to hear from you, and I'm sure you'll appreciate that 2022 has been a year of rapid change and events that have altered the operating landscape for everyone. The survey we ran back in January may have resulted in very different sets of respondents compared to the sentiment right now. We would like to rerun the poll to understand how far along you are in your journey to net zero. Number 1, we're already making significant changes. 2, we'll be implementing changes in the next 12 months. 3, changes are in our 5-year plan, or we've not even thought about it yet. Please select your answer and hit the submit button. I'll just repeat those. So the question is, how far along are you in your journey to net zero? We're already making significant changes. We'll be implementing changes in the next 12 months. Changes are in our 5-year plan, or we've not yet thought about it. Remember, nearly half of the respondents previously had no plan, so it'll be really interesting to understand whether this has changed. Once we've collated all the results, we'll share these by email with everyone.
So, returning to the original survey results, which we carried out at the start of 2022, respondents at that point in time highlighted concerns, their most important concerns, as stated as being rising costs and skill shortages. And just over 11% of respondents cited decarbonisation as their highest priority. But if we look in more detail at rising energy costs, it will not have escaped anybody's attention to know that we've seen a very significant acceleration and spiking in energy costs during the course of 2022. And I think we are aware of the geopolitical events that have largely driven prices higher, and that's caused concern about the availability of energy and the reliability of energy sources. So we've seen this phenomena where prices have increased significantly. We also see beyond the geopolitical events that the decarbonisation of the grid is also playing some part in the cost of energy, and increasingly we are more reliant on renewable wind and solar as part of the energy mix, and that does rely on weather conditions prevailing to provide suitable conditions for generation, and that may change from day to day. And the other significant thing that we've noted is price volatility. Now we have noticed that the price of energy is changing more frequently on a day-to-day basis, and we think that that phenomena is likely to increase, and I think that is an issue for businesses in their long-term planning, where you have both effects of the effect of high price and the effect of high price volatility. It becomes very difficult to plan, and therefore our pathway to decarbonisation very much is sort of focused initially on the need for energy efficiency. So if you can reduce your energy demand, that is a natural decarbonisation step, and we think that is the start of your pathway towards future decarbonisation. So beyond just the absolute effect of pricing, we also think that as you think about building your own pathway towards decarbonisation, you should take consideration of the power of consumers. And I think during this afternoon's discussion, we've sought to highlight that the do-nothing approach will inevitably lead you to higher prices anyway and higher costs anyway. But we want to sort of encourage people then to begin their journey towards decarbonisation, and failing to address that those energy efficiency measures initially will lead to higher costs, along with the risk of higher carbon costs. But we also see that the impact or the risk of consumers and brand owners becoming more active in seeking out low carbon hydrogen products and services, and therefore we think sort of inaction in that regard possibly also leads to potential loss of business, or some reputational damage in the long run if your products and services aren't decarbonised in line with the market. So we think there are lots of good reasons to begin to take action now to avoid the cost of inaction being greater in future, both through direct costs and through indirect means.
So where should we put our attention into decarbonising? Well, this graphic is from the Food and Drink Federation. It's decarbonisation across the value chain by 2040, which is their target for members. And the reason why that is important is 10 years before 2050, is that 1 kilogram of CO2 saved today is worth 10 kilograms of CO2 saved in 10 years' time. So it's really important to get on with it. And this graphic shows a typical spread. So there's a lot of carbon typically tied up in ingredients, in the manufacturing ingredients, and also in importing ingredients. And agriculture has a big carbon footprint, and that industry will have to reduce carbon footprint. Packaging typically contains plastic. Plastic is made from fossil fuels. So again, looking for new forms of packaging to reduce carbon footprint. Manufacturing, we're looking typically at heating and cooling. So if you're heating or cooling, typically both, then there's areas that you need to improve efficiency, improve productivity, potentially do some fuel switching to improve your carbon footprint. Distribution and storage, typically we're burning many food miles, and that's typically done with petrol and diesel at the moment, and again need to convert to an alternative fuel. And then finally, consumers and customers, in terms of how they use the food and any food wastage, there's a carbon footprint associated with that. So depending on where you are in the value chain, you can influence upstream of yourselves and downstream. So looking at what this means in terms of scope 1, 2 and 3 reporting. So scope 1 is direct use of energy. This can be to do with anything to do with heating or cooling in boilers or transport. And then also you've got scope 2, which is indirect, typically electricity, and then anything else is scope 3. So just to try and mark where you might think of in terms of decarbonisation of heat generation equipment in particular, this graphic from Food and Drink Federation sort of basically shows that 65% of energy in food and drink, so 2/3 is typically in boilers, in direct heating, and another 17% in ovens. So that's 80% is between those two. And then other applications in terms of bar markers, fryers, grills, kettles also come into play. So it's possible to decarbonise the energy source through use of an alternative fuel or alternative arrangement, such as electrification or heat pumps.
Thank you. I'd like to share some personal experience with you now in some insights into some of the large-scale industrial fuel switching trials that BOC have supported in the past year or so. I laid both of the examples that I wanted to share with you, both being world firsts, and this example, which took place on the Unilever Port Sunlight facility up in the northwest of England, where we fuel switched a very large industrial steam raising boiler. You can see from the photograph the setup employed by BOC. We imported hydrogen to site from our production facility in St Helens. And we were able to run the Unilever boiler continuously, and we ran that over a 4-week period to demonstrate the feasibility that hydrogen could be used as a fuel switching alternative, and to run that boiler carbon free for that period, without inducing any operating issues or indeed sort of creating any adverse NOx issues with the boiler. And that was done very, very successfully, as was the wider range of trials that we ran as part of that phase 1 set. So we ran a number of large primary industry types, which included cement production, lime production, and in this further example, a very large float glass furnace for Pilkingtons, again up in the northwest of England. And this is a very energy intense process, and therefore the requirement to run this really required an exceptional effort on BOC's part to mobilise a really sizable fleet of hydrogen tube trailers, as you can see pictured in the graphic, and to that end, we ran this trial, and it required well over 100 tube trailer deliveries to site to maintain a continuous hydrogen fuel switch. But again, we did it very successfully, and I wanted to really make the point that the BEIS is very supportive of these types of demonstrations and feasibility, sort of proof of concept that hydrogen fuel switching is capable in a wide range of industries, and I'd like to include food manufacturing in that process in future. And I guess also I just wanted to make the point that BOC have unique capabilities, we think, in this area in terms of our ability to both manufacture and distribute and have the technical support to deliver these trials successfully. So there is a lot of discussion around hydrogen, and it's clear that the volume of hydrogen fuel switching from natural gas will be both intense and very large scale, and our starting position is something like 85% of heating in the UK is done using natural gas. So it's very clear that there's a big road in front of us, and hydrogen, as you know, has some significant advantages in its no carbon and water vapor is the only product of combustion, and it's a key part of the government's clean energy strategy going forward, as it is for most of the major international economies. They all have a hydrogen strategy of some form. But I wanted to really sort of highlight the point that we should view this journey towards hydrogen decarbonisation and hydrogen fuel switching very much as a pathway towards hydrogen, and I believe that hydrogen will be the end goal in this journey, but the journey must start now and should start with a focus on energy efficiency. And we think that there is a role for oxygen initially in that process, and oxygen's a gas that is very helpful to the intensification of processes. We see it in both combustion, where we are able to use oxy-fuel combustion to reduce fuel gas considerably, and that reducing fuel gas is very much a significant decarbonisation step. Beyond that, oxygen is also very useful in oxygen dissolution processes such as water treatment for energy saving purposes. So there are there are existing technologies that can help you on your journey towards decarbonisation. They're well proven and available now, and that's really where your journey should start. As you go through that journey, then there are some stepping stones along the way, and it may not be wise to seek to step from today's scenario to a fully decarbonised scenario in one go. And it may be that sort of fuel switching or fuel blending may be the first step along the way. Some of you may be familiar with the high deploy approach described by UK government, which sought to put 20% hydrogen into the natural gas grid. The reason 20% was chosen is because that allows you to make that decarbonisation step with very little change to existing equipment, and that has the effect of reducing carbon by around about 7% overall for the 20% hydrogen substitution. I would also strongly advocate that you start to think about how you will build your knowledge and your experience of hydrogen and decarbonisation. As we've said throughout today's webinar, BOC have many decades worth of experience and knowledge and capability in this area, and certainly able to help you with trials and to build knowledge and data. But we think it's a very essential step that you understand how you're going to deal with this molecule, and how you're going to build experience and operating data and make adjustments to your process that might be necessary to successfully switch from natural gas or your fuel gas towards hydrogen. And that would then lead on to in future full fuel switching, and again depending on whether that is green hydrogen through an electrolysis route, or whether it's grid supplied hydrogen through one of the emerging clusters. There will be a point at which full fuel switching will take place, and if it's a combustion process, we very much think that oxy-hydrogen combustion is necessary to get both the sort of economic benefit and the fuel saving benefit from using that as a fuel of choice. So, just to finish, BOC have significant capability to enable us to support practical demonstrations, and would love to work with you. But please take away this this picture in your minds about the pathway towards decarbonisation. Thank you.
At this point in the webinar, I'd like to open the discussion to our audience and provide the opportunity for our experts to answer some of the questions that have been submitted during the webinar. So question number 1, can you replace natural gas with hydrogen in baking? Interesting question. Wayne, would you like to take that one, please?
Yeah, thanks, Natasha. Yeah, great question. Simple answer to that question is yes, you can. But I would say that there are some differences between the experience of combusting with natural gas versus hydrogen, which are worth pointing out in this example. So, for example, the flame temperature of hydrogen is about 245 degrees hotter. And the flame pattern with hydrogen is somewhat different compared to natural gas. So in direct fired ovens or heaters, then the experience of hydrogen may be slightly different. And the reason why we've been strongly advocating that customers think about undertaking trials and feasibility demonstrations on their own equipment with their own processes as part of their journey towards decarbonisation. But there are also some advantages here for hydrogen. So in the products of combustion from hydrogen is water vapour. So in a baking application, that may well be advantageous. So, simple answer: yes, hydrogen is a good alternative for natural gas to decarbonise the process. But there are some essential differences just to be aware of. Cedric, any other comments from you?
Just to say that OEMs are now making a lot of their equipment hydrogen ready or in the process of doing so. So if you're going to make a significant major investment in the next few years, look out for the tag on that and put that as part of your strategy to make sure you're future proofed.
Thank you.
Wayne, actually, you may want to take this one.
Sorry, Natasha, can you say the question again, because we missed your sound just at the start?
Yeah, sorry.
Carry on and ask the question.
What are the most important differences when switching from natural gas to hydrogen?
Thank you, Natasha.
Wayne, you able to take that one?
And yeah, it's another great question. Thank you. Some of the points, really, I think, from the answer to the previous question, in that there is often a lack of experience of using hydrogen when comparing it to natural gas, and that's that's commonplace. I think what I would say is that both are fuel gases, both have characteristics, and providing we are understanding and respecting the characteristics of those products, then they're perfectly safe and sort of good alternatives. I think I've said previously that BOC have a many decades long experience of manufacturing, transporting, storing, and engineering hydrogen systems. So we would I guess point to the fact that safety is built in to our hydrogen supply schemes and all of our activities surrounding hydrogen. But it is different. It's a less dense, lighter, smaller molecule than natural gas. Its flame speed is faster. Its flammability range is wider. So there are some essential differences. But I think the key here is to really understand and build understanding of what those differences are, build experience, and build up your local team's knowledge and confidence with hydrogen, and that's where an organisation like ours, with the track record and the experience and the knowledge, can be really helpful to the food sector, food manufacturing sector, and others. We would be we would be very happy to engage with anybody that wants to do so, to help them through that journey.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And then one for you, Cedric. Can we replace CO2 with nitrogen on mincemeat cooling easily?
Oh, great question. Please see, we got a cryogenics question. Yes, in a very quick answer. CO2 is the traditional way of rapidly chilling mincemeat products to basically get down to forming temperature. Liquid nitrogen and CO2 have similar enthalpies, and so it is possible, absolutely, to swap over. It requires different technology we've been developing for the last 20 years in terms of bottom injection technology. So you will need different equipment. But if you're interested in that, and particularly with the availability of CO2 and therefore the pricing of CO2 at the moment, if you'd like to make that change, please get in touch. There are many existing customers in the UK and globally who are doing that right now. Thanks.
Thanks, Cedric. Question number 4. How long do the experts believe it will be before hydrogen is available to industry at scale at a competitive price? Wayne, what are your thoughts on that long-term and short-term outlook?
Well, it's a great and difficult question to answer. So I can't give you any certainty. I can give you an opinion here. I think the role that government is currently playing, is seeking to incentivize this acceleration of hydrogen. So we see the industrial hydrogen accelerator problem providing grant funding to lots of participants to look for novel ways to accelerate the scale up of hydrogen to the marketplace. But many of those are still immature technologies, not yet ready for large scale commercial use. We also see the industrial cluster arrangements that have emerged. So Teesside and Humberside and the Northwest are the other sort of leading clusters where we're seeking to accelerate the scale up of hydrogen in those areas in order to bring sort of large scale sort of hydrogen delivery. But it's not without its challenges, Natasha. Linde, who are BOC's parent company, we're currently commercializing a very large-scale electrolyzer at a project in Germany. That's 24 megawatts, and that's not been without its challenges. And in these clusters, we're talking about 10, 20, up to 100 megawatts of green hydrogen production. And it's never been done at that scale. So we're into sort of some unknown territories here, and I think the scale up challenges will be significant. And my final point really is around commercials, because if you looked at the cost of hydrogen, then hydrogen is probably closer to 30 to 50 pounds a kilogram, in that sort of range, compared to the £3 a kilogram that would be suggested as being possible. So we're a long way from the end game here, where we've got the reliable large scale green hydrogen and blue hydrogen production, and it's at an economic level which is close to our target. So it will take many years, I think, to get to that point. However, I think the government are very, very committed to this. The hydrogen business model supports that transition to hydrogen, and will act as the as the sort of supporting mechanism whilst we get this hydrogen economy up and running and at scale. So I had to guess. Sorry, it's a long answer, but if I had to guess, it's probably 10 years before we get to that point.
Great, thank you for such a detailed answer. And then lastly, I think we can probably squeeze in one more. So number 5, does the panel envisage carbon labelling to the use of barcodes so consumers, their brand and the taxman can be informed? How do you see this for the future, Wayne, or maybe Cedric?
I guess with labelling, we've had a traffic light system for high fat, salt, sugar, and you can see that in the future to allow consumers make informed decisions, there will be something similar in terms of a carbon labelling. A long way to go before we get to that point, I would think. But directionally, for consumers to reward players that try hard to reduce carbon footprint and have a low carbon footprint, because consumers will want to know that, and labelling is part of that, and no doubt the taxation system will also incentivise that as well.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Cedric. So that's all we have time for the questions today, but any that were submitted that we weren't able to answer we'll be in contact directly. So with that in mind, I'll pass over to Cedric for the last few words.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you very much for listening today. Hope it's been useful and interesting. So just pause to me to give the final slide. I think, hopefully we've convinced you that the time to act is now, and to get on that journey, to assess where you are and where you need to be, and use that as a drive in order to create competitive advantage for yourselves and in the future. So the wait and see option is not a good option. There's financial and also societal drivers, and the need to change, not least with COP27 as we speak, is driving that change, and that change will only get stronger as the years pass by. It's in different ways you can do different things. Some of those things are simple, some of those things are not so simple. What we would try to say is that if you'd like some expertise and experience in some of these different areas, then BOC would be very pleased to talk to you in terms of decarbonising your organisation and helping you on your journey. BOC can provide with hydrogen technology, which looks to be the one of the choices in the future, and the grid, the electricity grid, provides about a fifth of our energy at the moment. So 80% is fossil fuels. It's very expensive to make that bigger. We'll no doubt need to do that, but just electrifying is not just the answer here. We need a diverse application and a diverse range of fuels in our kit bag to make the 2050. So BOC on that journey, hopefully, in terms of hydrogen and the government's keenness, and for good reason, we hope to be able to help you on your pathway to decarbonisation, particularly in that heating arena. Thank you.
Brilliant. That draws us to the end of our webinar today. Firstly, thank you very much to Wayne and Cedric for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us and answering all those really interesting questions. Any questions that we haven't covered today, we will contact you, as I said, directly. And if you do wish to get in contact and get in touch regards to the opportunities for yourself and your pathway to decarbonisation, please do so with either Wayne and Cedric displayed underneath. And lastly, there will be an exit survey which will pop up at the close of the webinar. If you can, please do take the time to complete the survey. It would be much appreciated. Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone for attending today.